What is up, everyone? Good morning again. It's your host, Carlos Ponce, and this is another live episode of Advancio Talks. And if you are just discovering us, welcome. And if you've been here since the very beginning, since 2022, well, you know what we are about. Advancio Talks is where we sit down with the people actually building the future of business and technology. Not just talking about it, but doing it. CTOs, founders, the folks making decisions that matter. So, whether you're drinking coffee, commuting, or just curious about what is actually happening in tech, well, stick around because today we have got Diana Decas, the CEO of Nationwide Neurobotics, with us today. And Diana's got stories and insights you won't hear anywhere else. So let's jump right in. Welcome to the show, Diana. It's a pleasure to have you here as ever.
Thank you so much, Carlos. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, thank you for the kind introduction.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Diana, let's start with obviously with you. So tell us a little bit tell us and the audience a little bit about you. Who's Diana Deca? What's your story? Anything you want to say about yourself that would be of interest to the audience, please.
All right. Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Dana Deka. I'm the founder of Neurobotics. So Neurobotics is a company that builds simulations that are powered by an underlying machine learning backend, which mimics to some extent the brain spatial computing system. We've used applications of the simulation platform in aerospace, funded by Boeing, in mobility, working with different car companies, across robotics, and also with dual use applications. The research behind this technology was done by myself in my PhD. So in Germany, my focus was on single neurons and understanding the input-output computation. How does a single neuron receive hundreds of thousands of inputs and have only one output? And how does it decide? And then later on in my postdoctoral research, I ended up focusing on the brain spatial computing system. So what that means is we, in our brains, integrate visual, auditory, tactile information to understand where we are. So if I were to get up, in this room and get up from the chair and start walking around, how does my brain figure out, first of all, how to stand straight, how to walk around, how to not bump into the different boundaries, and how to process the information around me. And while that might seem simple, it's actually some very complex computational work that we're trying to integrate into cars, into flying cars, into robots, into all of these things. So that's what robotics does in a nutshell. I don't know if that's covering everything that you want to know. On top of Neurobotics, there is MetaPilot Academy. So, okay, to simplify things, Neurobotics has built MetaPilot. That's the simulation platform that goes into many industries, right? And on top of MetaPilot Academy, we have, on top of MetaPilot, there's the Academy. So the Academy is now a private university. It offers MBA, bachelor, PhD programs, just because at the end of the day, I wanted to see more people like myself. I want to see more people with a technical background or with a scientific background making a difference in building technologies that really change things. I'll stop there, and then we can go deeper into the discussion.
Absolutely. No, yeah, actually I was going to ask you about specifically about Neurobot X. And I mean, you touched on the company a little bit, which is fine. But I'm curious. First of all, the name is very intriguing. Anything that starts with at least for us, the layman, from the layman's perspective, it's like neuro something. It's like, wow, it's got to be something really really interesting, right? And it has that vibe of something that's really a complex, that is integrated into our daily lives. So, what was the genesis of Neurobotics, if you don't mind sharing with us? How did it come about to be? How did you decide? Okay, this is a problem, or this is my vision, and I'm going to create this company, and I'm going to name it Neurobotics for this reason. How did it happen?
It's a really good question. Well, I have to go back to my PhD. I was doing a lot of work on mice. I was trying to understand that part of the brain that deals with spatial computing, right? And I thought, well, this was fascinating. I was so happy to be there, so lucky to work with these brilliant people, and the things you uncover, the chance to be one of the first people to figure things out or to understand something is really amazing. However, I also realized that there are probably 5 to 10 people maximum that will understand our work and why we're in the lab, until 2 a.m. And I figured I want my work to have impact. Like, I want to see some of these insights integrated into aerospace. I want to see this integrated into cars. The understanding that we have of how our brain works, I want to see more of that in the world. Just think of the fact that when we're talking right now, you and I, we're using less energy than a single light bulb. And think of all of the complex computations that both of us are doing, right?
Mhm.
So to be able to mimic that, just imagine what that does to the global economy, reducing energy consumption by 10,000 fold for all AI, right? That's one simple insight from the brain, and that's what it does. So that's what I wanted to do, and that's how we came up with robotics. We want to take the part of the brain that helps us solve problems into the world. So robotics
Mhm.
was the first application.
Gotcha, gotcha. Perfect. Yeah, well, that certainly sheds some light into how it came about. Neurobotics. So I'm going to make sure to follow your company and just be kept abreast of all your cool undertakings. So let's move on to the topic today. We're going to be talking about this is another interesting topic, like brains behind the build. In other words, how neurotech is rewriting the rules of software delivery. First question that I have for you is, and then I'll move on to some other. I mean, I have many questions, but this is the first question that I would like to ask you: is why did you choose this particular topic? Why did you feel that it's relevant in this day and age?
Yeah, well, obviously we live in the world in the age of LLMs, right? AI is affecting everything we do. I'm sure you've heard of a lot of people playing with Claude Code or with some other language models. AI is everywhere. It's affecting the way people work, the way people study, and the way they live their lives, right? So what is the next step? The entire idea behind Metapilot, or the name behind the platform Metapilot, was who's going to pilot all of these things, right? Who's going to pilot AI? Who's going to bring it into the next civilizational leap, right? And how do we make sure that we go in the right direction? In my head, as someone who grew up with a lot of sci-fi books, the right direction would be, us going into space, solving big problems, curing cancer, figuring out how the
Mhm.
brain works, stem cells, all of these beautiful endeavors that are worth our time, right? And I think AI can be a great tool for that. But it's always humans that have to be in the driver's seat. So the person that does that is a meta pilot, is someone that has the right training for it. But ultimately, this will be a brain. I mean, I will not name the people who talked about this, but a lot of people said that there's a bottleneck in the human AI interaction, right? The way we interact now through our smartphone is we spend a lot of time on our smartphones, right? There could be much faster ways to communicate with AI. And the way that we're thinking about it is through brain machine interfaces.
Great. Yeah. Diana, you have built systems at the intersection of neuroscience, AI, and XR. Under real aerospace and government pressure. So, what does delivering high stakes technology actually look like when the margin for error is zero?
Yes, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm actually quite thankful for that, because I think the ultimate test of a founder is to be put in a situation where you have to deliver like this, where you cannot make mistakes, and when you have to demo your product and you simply cannot fail. I will not go into too much detail, but one of our paid projects with one government, it required us to install multiple simulators using our Metapilot platform. And then we had both members of their government as well as other people who have never played a game in XR before test it out for the first time with VR goggles. and integrated biometrics, right? So we had to prepare everything, we had to make sure that everything works. And speaking of margin for error zero, what happened is we were rolling a very complex simulation, a very heavy simulation, right? A
Mhm.
digital twin of the entire city on very basic Wi-Fi. So because the connection wasn't great, our game kept lagging, right? And then we were thinking, well, if the game lags while these guys are trying it out, we are in a lot of trouble. So I had to go to one of the nearby stores myself, as I was the person in charge of all of this, and to find a router and a way to get more data for our simulators to be running the simulation properly, because we simply couldn't risk that this thing fails and that our entire demo day fails in front of everyone, including our paying clients. So this is the kind of situation where you really question, why am I doing this? Why did I put myself in under such stress? But I have to say, I kind of enjoyed it, most of it, 99% of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, when you enjoy certain types of stress, when you know
Yeah.
that your stress is going to be fruitful and fulfilling, hey, the more the merrier. Thank you. So, okay, so when you were, here's something that I wanted to ask you is when you were building the MetaPilot platform, how did you decide what to build in-house versus bringing it in an external engineering talent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very good question, right? Because especially now, again, with AI, when you're building simulations, there's so much being said around generative AI. There's so many things that you can get off the internet, like entire packages versus what is worth building inside. So it's probably when building a product, the most important question. What do you have in-house versus what you already use? So, because in my PhD, I worked a lot with Unity to build the simulations for the mice we were working with. This was similar work in Unity. So, in the case of the game MetaPilot, most environments, cities, and most assets, including the flying car models, are designed by me and the architecture is made by me. However, because I have to do a lot of other things, I brought in people to help me out with the details, to sort out the bugs, and basically just iron out things as we were starting to test with influencers. So this is my thinking. It might seem different from other CEOs' perspective, but I am a believer that CEOs should be technical, at least to the extent that they understand what their product is made of, so that they can also understand, for example, if they hire an external programmer team to know, okay, what takes 6,000 hours and what takes 60 hours of work, and what takes 300 programmers versus what takes 20
Hmm.
with a good technical lead, right? So these are things that are good for you to know if you're a CEO, I think. Um, so that's kind of the process. Let's just say I started the whole thing myself and I started to outsource where I felt like, okay, this can be easily done outside. That would be, I don't know if I answer your question with that.
Yeah, no, you certainly did. So thank you. I appreciate it. So, okay, there's something else that I wanted to ask you, and this is related to what Advancio, the show's sponsor, does. So, Advancio works with clients facing tight deadlines and legacy systems. Have you ever had to integrate cutting edge neurotech into an outdated infrastructure, and how did you navigate that?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think the example of running a very complex simulation on a data router that runs the lowest Wi-Fi packages is a good example. But another one, in aerospace and defense, not to mention any company or any government, in general, you deal with legacy systems, right? It's very rare that these are redesigned from scratch. Imagine you work at Airbus or Boeing or Thales, it's always going to be legacy systems. So one way to go around it, I mean, it's as I said, it's understanding the legacy part. You have to have a bit of knowledge about the old school way of programming, and this is where I would highly suggest not to rely entirely on Claude Code or on AI when trying to integrate, with the service provider. So If I were a CEO starting now, I would start to understand those legacy systems, what programming language they use, what architecture they have. Even if that architecture is not obvious to me, I would try to learn that and understand how to integrate. And
Hmm.
one great example with this is we've seen the government of Ukraine releasing a huge data set on what happens on the battlefield. This is very useful for startups that are trying to design dual use solutions on the one hand. But what we're hearing also is on the ground, when people don't really have defense experience or experience integrating solutions on the battlefield, it's actually much harder to implement them, and it's very hard for governments to implement them.
Hmm.
So I would work very closely with someone who actually works and has been working with those legacy systems for a long time. Also to acknowledge my own limitations because I don't have 30 years experience working with aerospace programming languages. So it's good to work with someone that.
Yeah, it certainly is. And you know what else I found intriguing is, especially when the numbers jump at me. For example, you took a 50K project to a $50 million conversation. How much of that outcome depended on the quality of the technology versus the quality of the team that built it?
Well, I guess we're going back again to that moment, which is kind of telling, right? This this project that was initially paid 50K after fixing the Wi-Fi issue and a lot of other issues, frankly, when you have eye tracking and biometrics running together with a VR headset and all of these things, there are many things that can go wrong. And this is something I was kind of used to since doing neuroscience. When you have like a live mouse and you have a microscope, you have an electrophysiology rig and a laser going through the room, a lot of things that can go wrong. So it's kind of a training on, managing chaos in a way. So I think it's actually the fact that they observed us, just the way myself and my teammate, we managed to not panic in the moment. We didn't have a tantrum because things weren't working the way they did. We just kind of humbly accepted the situation and we found a solution, right? And then we remained polite and calm after fixing the technical problem. And I think that's a skill I'd like to teach a lot of people, how to stay calm under extreme pressure. And
Mhm.
even when things are not the way you hope they are, right? Sometimes things don't fit our expectations and you just have to be like, okay, this is the situation, this is what needs to be done, and that's it. And so FYI, this is how it led to a 50 million project. After that demo, we were asked to continue the discussion separately. And then they started to see, just by playing the game and having the demo, how their city would look like with flying cars. They started discussing in more depth about fully implementing that and, fledging out a financial model for expanding this.
Mhm. Okay. And there's something that we can definitely not omit, which is AI. So right. So I'd like to touch on AI a little bit. So as AI becomes more embedded in software delivery itself, how do you see the role of the software engineering team evolving over the next 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think a lot of people want to know. I have myself so many friends and colleagues who are very excited about Claude Code, right? And I noticed myself within a year when using Claude Code or GitHub Copilot or any of these tools that are more advanced. I used it also to look at elements in our simulation, our game. In our case, it was to add more cities or add more assets. And it did a fantastic job of finding those points. Sometimes some programmers do not document their code very well, and it makes it very hard for the next human being to understand the code. And sometimes what these tools can do is document the code for you and organize it and clear it up, which makes things a lot easier. So I would say, just to go full circle to the beginning of our conversation, as a founder, not just as a product manager, but as a founder, it's good to have a really clear idea of what your product is if it's a piece of software. Like, what's the architecture like? What are the different modules? What needs to be done? How much effort does that take, more or less, with AI versus human? and then starting to outsource this. And in the future, I mean, as we're already seeing, you can reduce a team of 100 programmers to maybe 10 or 15 at this point. So,
Mhm.
what does that mean in the future? On the other hand, very important to understand, as I said, I prefer to work with people that understand legacy code as well. And I prefer to work with people that have more experience than me programming before AI. So I would try to keep people like that in the team just because vibe coding is a real problem. There's this t-shirt that we've been thinking of getting for the team which says I'm here to clean up your vibe code, which is a bit about that. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes these LLMs still hallucinate and they're going to write, a few lines of incorrect code and then push it in your final version, and you will not know what happened to your game or your product and why it's not working. So that's why it's good to still have programmers. And in the same way as you still need a driver in the driver's seat in case the car starts acting weird, you need programmers to have a look at the code in case it starts acting weird as well.
You mentioned the word vibe coding, which is, I've been hearing it a lot lately. So I can't help but asking you, when you think about team composition, when building at the intersection of neuroscience, AI, XR, what skills are hardest to find in this intersection?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It depends a little bit where you go with the product, right? If it's a pure software product, then it's still kind of okay to not involve medical or clinical people in the founder's team. If you are trying to build a brain implant or something that needs to go through clinical grade, FDA approval or the like, you really need to have a medical person. Also for legal reasons, because you are legally responsible when dealing with vulnerable people in hospitals. But in general, depending on the output. So if it's a game, I'd like to have someone that has some experience in, publishing fully functional games. If it's a piece of software, ideally a person with product experience, also integrating with legacy systems if you're doing dual use. And then, as I said, medical, biotech, neurotech, anything that deals with human beings, I would try to have someone medical or a clinician in there because it's good to know. I mean, when you go to a doctor, you want to make sure that they have a degree, right? Not just that they searched your symptoms on ChatGPT. And if you
Right.
fly a plane, you want to make sure that the pilot has the right degree and that they didn't just look this up. There are some other jobs where it's kind of okay to wing it, but there are some aspects where you really cannot.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a little bit about the skills. Now, I would also like to ask you about legacy systems. So legacy systems are a reality for most aerospace and government clients, right? So how do you integrate cutting edge spatial computing technology into environments that weren't built for it?
This is a great point, and here I can talk a bit from my experience being a Boeing-backed startup. This is how we started, and I will be very honest. I will say that initially I was coming in as an academic, and I was fascinated by my own topic of study, which was like brain-inspired computing. So I bothered a lot of people at these companies, Boeing and Airbus, and asked them, "Hey, would you like to use a product that combines brain science and AI?" And they were like, "No, absolutely not." We're definitely not interested in that. So, as a founder, I think it's really important to discuss with the people in that industry a lot before even beginning to build a product and to really understand their pain points and make sure that you're not just, a solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist. So that would be my advice. By the time we understood that there's an emerging field in aerospace and it's called eVTOL or flying cars, and those need synthetic data that we can generate, then we started to realize, okay, this is where we can blend in. This is where, there's a possibility for us to add value to the industry. So that's kind of how we think about it. We didn't think about, as a startup, we're going to change the entire industry and get rid of legacy systems completely. That's impossible. It was more like, where do we fit in? And once we made it at this point and some people start using our product, then we can expand and change things.
Okay, okay. And I'm thinking also about uh, synthetic data generation. And I'm wondering what roles it plays in training AI systems and why is VR such a powerful environment for producing it?
Well, I can speak now for flying cars because I think by now we have 10 companies that are running live on Metapilot and two governments already that have been using our data, some of which were paying quite a lot for it. So with flying cars, because many of them are startups, their board is expecting to see some kind of traction, right? So when you have a company like that, you probably have like a prototype, or if you're building a drone, right, you have a small prototype of that, and that's pretty much all you have because it's really hard to get through regulatory approval. It's hard to build a full size aircraft, right? It's expensive when you're at seed stage. So having that simulation of the model that they had within our digital twin of a city helped those companies a lot. It helped their board understand that there is traction here. And it also helped us push them through regulatory approval because being on some regulatory boards for flying cars, we were able to, push the idea that some of this data has to be synthetic data. You cannot just let a flying car, fly around randomly in a city around skyscrapers because it's expensive and it's dangerous. So let's simulate as much as we can, and after that we are ready for the first test. So it saved the money, it helped the investors understand what's happening there, and that's how we show that we can add value.
Okay, I see. Okay, Diana, we're approaching the final segment, the final minutes of today's conversation, and I still got a couple more questions for you. And I think this is let's take advantage of that for advice. So, what advice would you give to us? Let's say a software engineering leader or team who wants to start exploring neurotech or spatial computing but doesn't know where to begin.
Well, that's a good question. I generally hate, proposing our solutions per se, but the programs that we launched, a lot of them are designed specifically for this. So, Meta Pilot Academy, the main reason why we launched these programs is so that we can get people to have a basic understanding of whether it's neurotechnology, whether it's XR and spatial computing. They will first get a very broad overview of everything that's out there. And then they will be able to go deeper with specialization courses that fit whatever it is that they want to do. And then they will get access to our network as well, because knowing the right people is important. So if I were them, I would just go to Meta Pilot Academy and I would apply to one of these things. We also design these smaller, shorter courses for agentic AI for different technologies. So agentic AI for XR and spatial computing, agentic AI for recruiters, for sales. There's so much information out there on the internet, and it's really hard to make sense of, what do I need to learn to be competitive on the market? There have been a lot of layoffs, and for many people, they were a bit, blindsided. Like, what is it that I do not know about AI, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do here to give people a basic understanding of what they need to know, and also to make them understand that they already have a lot of skills that are very important. So if you're a person in VR that's interested in neuroscience, that's okay. You can get started, and not everyone is going to think you're an idiot for trying. It's a really important part of it. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think you gotta. I mean, a lot of these folks might think that this is an extremely esoteric and interesting and exceedingly appealing area of right of activity. But I would assume, from what I'm hearing, I would assume that it does. It comes with its share of stress, right? Especially in high stakes environments, especially when working, with government and aerospace and all that. So that's my last question to you: is how do you manage the tension between moving fast on high stakes projects and maintaining the rigor that aerospace and government clients demand?
Yeah, very good question to end things. I mean, we've always been at the limit, and I think the most successful people I've seen have always been at the border of pushing things too hard. Sometimes as a startup to change legacy, not just systems, but thinking or like silo based thinking, you have to be quite rough. I mean, you have to push things. You cannot just be passive and say, well, okay, this is how things work. So, sometimes we push these boundaries. We dealt with it. What I can say, it's difficult, but it's definitely worth it. Like I
Mhm.
said, there's an understanding of both sides. There's a cultural understanding, an understanding between generations, and there's what helps is just empathy for the other person. Like I mentioned before, like when we're speaking to a person that works in a corporation and works in aerospace safety, they
Right.
don't need to be interested in neuroscience, right? So it's my job to make it interesting for them. So that's
Mhm.
kind of how these discussions work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Diana, unfortunately, we have run out of time. So it was a great, great, great conversation indeed, and I'm sure it's going to spark the interest in many of the viewers who are going to be watching the recorded version as well. So before we go, let me ask you something. How can the viewers who are watching now or will be watching you in the future and the recordings? How can they contact you? I'm assuming you are on LinkedIn, right? How can they contact you?
Yeah, sure. Please look me up, Dana Deca from Neurobotics on LinkedIn. I guess you can see the links and also
Right there, right?
right there. And that's me. And if you like, you can also go to metapilotacademy.com and then just go there and have a look at the website and what it does. So just this thing over here.
There
Um,
you have it, folks. The metapilotacademy.com. Is that the best way to go, or do you have an email that we can share, or do you just want
Oh,
to?
yeah, yeah. You will find it on the website. It's admissions at metapilotacademy.com. So there you'll be able to find what it is that you need to learn, what you're curious about, and where to start. And from there,
Perfect.
one of the team members will pick up.
Great. Awesome. Well, the only thing left for me to do, Diana, is thank you for having been with us on the show today. It was exceedingly interesting, and especially for those of us who are learning about it and getting catching up with new technologies. Like I said, like old timers like us do need to catch up with what's going on out there, and so that we remain current. So that being said, thank you, Diana, again, and please stay with me as we go off the air. And the rest of you, please just remember that on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, we always have great conversations with tech luminaries like Diana, who are willing to come with us and share their expertise, the lessons learned, the pitfalls, the hurdles, everything for our audience to take advantage of. So, that being said, again, thank you, Diana, and the rest of you folks. See you next time right here on Advancio Talks, Wednesdays, 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos.